I mean, it's a conversation at the end of the day, shifting the conversation around the South African cricket team and that narrative that exists.
These type of conversations are happening in casual commentary at braais at home with people that are just watching the game and those sort of things. And we're wanting to do nothing different than having that same sort of conversation, perhaps just lift the lid somewhat, lift the caliber of the conversation, because we've already peeked behind the curtains or under the covers, if you want to use that term, right?
As soon as you get clear on your motivations and your purpose and your intention, a lot of things can start falling into place.
Yeah.
A lot of things become automated. A lot of things all of a sudden goes, oh, okay, cool, that's how I'm going to do it. So the hows become very clear when the whys are clear.
These guys are hopeful that they're winners. They're not seeing themselves as winners entering it. Despite their having illustrious careers, it's a matter of coming together under the Proteas brand is where things come unstuck in a way.
So the identities of our local cricketing ecosystem has been completely eradicated at a provincial level. There is no longer that sort of, oh, I want to play for this team. Yeah.
It's like taking someone that's not familiar or not comfortable or used to being free and not shown how to handle that freedom. It's the same sort of analogy when we start talking about a playing philosophy of playing with freedom.
All exciting stuff that we're going to get into, right? All exciting stuff that we're going to get into. I'm already salivating a little bit. Right, Russel, my thanks. It's awesome to have you here today, and in particular because of the topic that we're going to explore a little bit, or start exploring in this conversation around coaching in South Africa. I think the reason it appeals to me so much is because, one, I'm a coach, and two, it's kind of like popped its head up at different times in our conversations, you know. And so we sort of thought that it would be good to just get stuck into this, right? And I think my initial thinking, is that if we think of this idea of coaching cricketers in South Africa and what that means, and how that happens through our coach education system, with which I've been involved with extensively over the last couple of years, since 2005, really, at various levels. And you see what you see sort of unfold on the national stage, and sort of in particular some of the things we've spoken about here, the idea of raising individuals above sort of the Proteas brand. It's very obvious that happens all the way through the coaching system, I think, in all parts of South Africa. I call it the golden boy, sort of the golden boy thing, where we identify our golden boy and we kind of just stick with him. You know, late developers don't always come through the system. In fact, I don't think the system actually allows for that much. We tend to heighten players at under 19 level. Take a Devil Brevis, for example, Luandre Pretorius currently, where they sort of made this thing at 19 already. And developmentally, there's still a lot that must happen, right?
Yes.
And so really, really just keen to explore this topic with you all. I think I'm gonna go to Russel, because obviously we're not just going to talk about sort of coaching youth cricket, right? We're definitely going to delve into some things, and I'm sure Russel will get us onto some of those topics. But I thought, just by way of introducing it, to say sort of that's where my interest would lie in this conversation to a certain extent, and I know we're going to get into all sorts of juicy and good stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. It's interesting the way you introduced that. I've just found, just recollecting the way back in the day, we always used to go out, and if you send out coaches or scouts actually to go and recruit, talented individuals, if they go around the country and try and see an earmark, okay, this is our next champion type of thing. So I'm wondering, like, just by the mere fact that we're trying to spot talent and therefore we kind of buy into the fact that this is our future stars, as you just pointed out, if that already in and of itself is a flaw in our approach. Yes, we have to see if someone has capacity, someone has capabilities of playing at the highest level, but are we then grooming them well enough to be the full-on champion, or are we actually coaching or grooming them to be celebrities? Because that's what we kind of almost, like you use the baby AB scenario, right? It's not Devil Brevis, it's a baby AB. So you kind of already putting the celebrity status on this kid that's just come from an under-19 World Cup, right? And obviously he tried to shake it off to some extent, but there is some form of ego, rubbing when you do those sorts of things. But I think that in that way, it frames the way we coach. Now, coaching is another word for leadership. It's a form of leadership. It's like parenting. So would you want to put this massive label on a future prospect, if you want to call it that way, and automatically impose this sense of expediency, the sense of celebrity stature, this hero worship at that young age? Surely they should grow into it. We did the same thing with AB himself, actually. We saw him as this protege coming through the system, all these different type of thoughts about him. And in a sense, what that done was it basically pushed him back in his career, because it took a while to kind of get into it, to become this Mr. 360 that we now know him to be. And since almost, without real resignation, he's probably drifted out of the system somewhat, in a little inglorious fashion, if you want to put it that way. So are we really going a mature way of doing this leadership or coaching style of us in South Africa, or parenting style, if you want to call it that? Is it a mature way to go about it? And that's just one thing that stood out in terms of what you just said. Now, I do want to say, though, up front, that we're probably going to be mentioning a few names along the way, but it's not a personal take on these particular coaches, but more, they're in a public profile position. So we're kind of unpacking it and the merits in which they are there and the criteria in which they have been placed in that position, because they represent us all. So we kind of want to look at the flaws of how those things have come about, so that we can maybe learn from it. The learnings is important, as Markram and the company are always saying. So we want to kind of learn ourselves and try and see if we can maybe be a little bit more wiser in the way things have come across. So therefore, whatever we're going to get to say here today are actually observations from ourselves, maybe first-hand observations or a little bit further afar off, but they are definitely not judgments, particularly not personal judgments on individuals. So that's kind of in a way what we're attempting to do when we look at the coaching aspect, particularly as it relates to the Proteas and in the structures.
Yeah, awesome. I want to go just asking Kululeko to put his voice in here, so that I'm sure he's going to already raise some of the things that we want to get into.
Yes, good morning, Jody, from our side, and then good afternoon to you, Russel. I love this. I mean, when I heard the two of you guys saying that you want to speak about coaching, I said, look, I'd like to chip in. And I think naturally, just like yourself, Jody, because I'm also a coach, I will naturally have some things to say, So one of the struggles in South Africa, I think, is that I don't think we are clear on what is the criteria for what we think is going to make a good coach. So what I mean by that is we often believe that if somebody was a good player, so if somebody played for South Africa, that they automatically going to make a good coach, right? And I asked a good friend of mine, I used to play with him at university. He said, look, Juventus in football are not doing well. They're starting to lose games, even though they are coached by Pirlo. So Andrea Pirlo was a legend in Italian football and for Juventus and AC Milan. And I said to him, let me tell you something, boy. I said to him, the fact that somebody's a good maths and physics student doesn't mean that they got the highest marks for maths and science, that they're going to be the best maths and science teacher. And he said, wow, you're making sense. So in South Africa, we often, when we think about a next Proteas coach, very pedestrian conversations on social media is that let's go for so-and-so, or let's call back so-and-so, one of our legends who played for us, because they've been there, right? But essentially, coaching is about helping people to become the best version of themselves, right? So that's really what coaching is about. And although most of the times people think that because you as a coach were good technically and tactically, maybe you used to captain South Africa, what they don't understand is that coaching is about technical, tactical, physical, mental, but also lifestyle, or what we call spiritual skills, right? Now, I usually have a philosophy that we develop skill first, because without skill, you've got nothing. Then we develop strategy. And then lastly, we develop the mental management. So we develop what you guys call the soft skills. That's why we've got mental coaches, right? So because of that, I always say, look, We develop first the skill, but then we develop the strategy. When I combine all those 5 things, technical, tactical, physical, mental, and lifestyle factors, my relationship with the player is like a body and the soul, or it's like a movie script writer and the movie actor. I can't go onto the movie as a coach. I've written the script. The script is that we're looking to get 180 on this wicket. This is what we're going to do, the power play. This is what we're going to do, the middle overs, and make sure that we're not more than 4 wickets down by the 14th over. Then we're going to go big with our big hitters, right? But remember, the player is my body. So for them to perform, they need to have the skill. They need to understand the strategy, but mentally they need to be in a very good space, right? So that's essentially what coaching is about. It's about helping people to become better. Now, the fact that I've played for South Africa or not has very little to do with my ability to coach because of the things that I've mentioned now. It's about, am I able to, so if you speak to psychologists, especially the ones who help people in drug rehabilitation centers, they speak about you yourself must have certain characteristics if you want to help people to change. So they speak, for example, about, are you yourself do you have self-awareness, right? But also, are you open to and are you accepting of your own feelings and experiences? How many times do coaches project their own insecurity onto the team? Because the coach is afraid that he's going to lose his contract, he starts to panic if the key players are not on form. But then it speaks about, am I open-minded? And then am I able to develop warm and deep relationships with others as a coach? So this thing of having a 2-day workshop in Marabastad and then next week I'm having a 2-day fast bowling workshop in Bloemfontein, that's not how you develop players. It's like going around the country and helping a drug addict for 1 or 2 sessions. Then I leave. That's not going to help you change. So these things need to be more long-term. So we can't keep hiding behind budgets, right? And then it asks, are you accepting of personal responsibility for your own behaviors as a coach? So if I'm a coach who sometimes smokes with the players or drinks and whatnot, do I take responsibility that I'm not actually going to influence the players well, right? And then one of the things that you must have is a sense of humor, but you must be a risk taker. So I'll tell you why I stopped at being a risk taker. If I'm afraid of taking a risk as a head coach of, let's say, head coach of Crocodile's team, to say that every time we play a 4-day game, I'm going to invite for every day 2 club coaches to come and be in the setup and to develop them, right? If I'm afraid to take those risks, if I'm afraid to take the risk of saying, look, there's a young talent, he's unknown, it's a big competition, I'm going to gamble with him, Ngaba Peter or whoever it is, Gerald Kutia, how will I inspire the players to be able to take risks when they're at the World Cup? You understand? So lastly, this is just to recap to the listeners. Coaching is not about what level Jody played at, or what level I played at, or what level Jeff Toyana played at. Because we could take Mickey Arthur and Graham Ford and Russell Domingo. They never played for South Africa. So this idea that you must first play for South Africa is a farce, because as much as someone like, let's say, Mark Boucher, he did well with the Titans, right? A mentor of mine said that to win competitions is easy. Developing players is harder. And I asked him, Coach, what do you mean? He said, I could coach anywhere where they've got a budget to buy me all the best players in South Africa, and I'll win competitions. But he said, developing players, taking a player from not knowing his or her true potential and making a world champion out of them, that's the true art of coaching. You know, lo and behold, Mark Boucher, when he left South Africa cricket, on social media, we were told that it's a big loss. We don't know what we've got till it's left, till it's gone. That Boucher is doing the right thing. There are greener pastures. When I read the Mumbai Indians fan pages a few weeks ago, when they officially crashed out of the qualifiers of the IPL, people said Mumbai must never bring that guy back. And then if you can remember, Jack Callis is another example of a good player. I wish I had a quarter of the record that man has, right? I admire him as a cricketer. But we believe that the criteria for him to be the batting coach is that he must have a good batting record. Then when he stopped coaching South Africa as a batting coach, again, on social media, people who speak about merit said that it's a big loss. England tried Jack Callis and they took him to Sri Lanka. After that, they said, no, we don't want this guy anymore. Said, sorry, no thanks. You see? So I just wanted to start on the criteria, and then I think I can open up the conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. There's quite a lot in that, right? And I knew you were going to drop some bombs at us. I knew you were going to sort of open it up beautifully, because this was part of our sort of offline conversations, which led to this idea that we've got to be talking about this and sort of get this episode out there. You know, I'm reminded of, as you're speaking there, when, and if I look at this more systemically in nature, if you think of our Cricket South Africa system, right, based on what you said, if you think of how Mark Boucher became a coach, right? He became a coach. I think Titans was looking for a coach. I think he was available. He most probably had nothing better to do. I don't know all the details. Boom. He becomes the Titans head coach, right? At that time, it was a big issue because he only had a level 2 coaching certificate. Now, in South Africa, if you want to coach at the under-19 national provincial tournament, the Kaimajola week, if you want to coach at that week, to be selected as a coach to that week, and not just that one, the week below it, under 16s, as well, the national tournament, you have to have a level 3 to be potentially considered to take a team, right? Or in the process of getting your level 3. And so I remember at the time, it caused sort of a big ruckus, like, how does somebody who only has a level 2 coaching qualification end up coaching a provincial setup, right? And hey, the Titans did okay, I think, underneath them. It wasn't like they went backwards that much. But I'm often thinking, at sort of provincial level, a coach can come into a system and the previous coach did exceptionally well. And maybe for another 2 or 3 years, they still benefit from the work that was done before. And then sort of the wheels starts coming off. If they're not on it, right? If they're not on it from the get-go. I think the Titans are just still doing okay to a certain extent. Having said that, then if you think systemically about, so here's an individual who became a coach of a provincial senior men's team in our country with not the right qualifications, not the qualifications that you need to have behind your name. In order to apply for that position, right? And I don't know if he applied. Maybe he was headhunted. Then when it got to the national team, and at the time, our good friend Enoch was sort of in the process. I think he took the team to India as the stand-in head coach. They didn't go too well there. He came back, and he applied for the actual position. At the time, the Titans CEO was the CSA interim CEO. Graham Smith got appointed as the director of cricket, and Mark Boucher, I think, didn't even apply for the position as the national coach. It was sort of just handed to him. At that time, I think he was busy with his level 3. I know that because I presented at that level 3. He was certainly on the Zoom calls, and I think I engaged with him once or twice. He asked a question or two about some of the stuff I presented. And so, you know, now we've got a head coach, and he became the head coach under this banner of, we need his character, because Mark Boucher has a specific type of character. He's that sort of tough competitor, right? And I think it was felt that we need this head coach to embody that, so that he can teach that to the people around him, almost be more like a role model. And so my sense was always at the time, wouldn't it be better to have him on as a consultant and have a proper head coach actually coaching? And if I say proper, I mean somebody with the skills, the experience, the qualifications, the track record of being a high-level head coach, right? And I'm not saying it had to be Enoch. It could have been somebody different potentially at the time. But nonetheless, he got given the position. And it was interesting to see that during that time, we were the last team to qualify for the World Cup, 50 over World Cup last year, right? For this T20 World Cup, we were sort of not, our build up to this hasn't been great. And I think it's on the back of the sort of systemically the structures that was built around the national team during Mark Boucher's reign. Now, is he solely responsible for all of that? Most probably not, because, you know, there's a team around him, a board, et cetera, et cetera. But systemically, I think it's a problem that we're taking coaches And we're saying based on, and so this is the criteria conversation, right? Based on this criteria that you've played international sport, based on the criteria that you have a certain character trait, we're going to make you a head coach of our national team. Versus saying, no, we need the best head coach that can run this environment, that can get these, cricketers to play the brand we want them to play, to get them to be empowered and encouraged and supported, and to build the team culture around this team in the way that we want that. And then we could have the Mark Bouchers of this world come in from time to time and consult, or maybe join us on a tour. And we can feed off their character traits that we want, rather than make that the center of the attention in the room. Because not everybody is that. I think before we spoke about Marco Jansen, that's character is sort of, not that, right? Not the same way. And so I think if you're trying to make people like other people, and that's your thing from the outset, to say you must all learn to be like that, that's never a good recipe. That's never, ever a good recipe, I think, for success in any team, because it says who you are is not good enough. We need you to be different. Yeah, Russell, I see your hand was sort of raised there.
Yeah, you're taking me back to previous occasions now when, the Boucher, Graham Smith incidents. It's just interesting, though, that the conversations that are already happening, particularly within the system and the people that are participating in that system, right? These type of conversations are pretty transparent, pretty blatant, pretty, out there, pretty bold. And, that type of thing doesn't land up with the public opinion, to be honest. So people make up their own assumptions and assume that just on the basis of having a semi-decent international career, that automatically we must give you the credence or the respect that you're supposed to be getting. But as you're saying, coaching, which is it's a form of leadership that is completely different to when you're a player. You don't have to factor in all forms of things that contribute towards being a coach versus being a player. But Boucher at the time, as we know, very, very bullish in the bravado type. When he was a player, he was part of what was publicly known at the STN hearings of the Big Five. So he was a dominating force. He was like in your face and controlling, very kind of enforcing style and persona. So for Graham to come back in as a director, which is the same type of persona, he chose to kind of bring back the old guard. So that is exactly what we didn't need. Now, what would have been very good was, as you pointed out about him possibly coming as a consultant back in the day, was to keep Enoch in the position of maybe a trainer or an acting role, and let Boucher come in as a consultant to him, or even an assistant to him. Why couldn't he find a way to serve Enoch, as an example, and capacitate Enoch to take over the role as the head coach of the national team? Those type of things that have done far more benefit to the grander cause, for the bigger picture of what we're attempting to do. But the reality is, and the talk was behind the scenes, that at the time, basically, to say it plainly, black leadership of CSA mucked the whole thing up, and they needed to call on reputable white faces again to come back into the spaces in the form of Graham Smith as director and Mark Boucher, and they were going to save South African cricket from itself, including a Jacques Faure, who was also placed in as a CEO role. Because there's a lot of talk, and the SJN has all declared these, that Graham was adamant to saying, as long as the Bung is there as a CEO, and I'm not going to rehash that, but I'm just saying, as the Bung is there as a CEO, he doesn't want to be involved. You need Jacques Faure to be the CEO and all of that. So optically, as they pointed out, it wasn't the right thing, but they also came in with a bad spirit and a bad vibe. So that leadership there, everything rises and falls on leadership. That's what the guru says of leadership, right? That leadership was destined to fall. It should fall, and we should have cried out for that falling far earlier, because it was oppressive. It was limiting. It was restrictive. We had that for years and years when the players were playing. So we didn't need to have another format for another few more years. So essentially, this is why we want to look at the whole coaching leadership dynamic, because right now, as you guys have pointed out, Boucher, but we can move very quickly over. Boucher took over from Rob Walter at the Titans. So Rob done some work and created some form of success. But did he really have success? Because ultimately we have to, measure apple with apples or whatever, Let's be realistic about it. Because those guys were mature players who already kind of knew their games, and they gelled for so many years. So it was almost effortless for them to win already, right? So how much success did he have? So Rob was there before Boucher at the Titans and then left and went overseas to New Zealand and played there. I'm not sure how much he's won or succeeded there, to be honest. But then get recruited back into the with no first class cricketing pedigree, and now being regarded again as the head coach of the national team. So how much weight or criteria do you actually need to coach the national Proteas team? Why is Rob Walters the one that's chosen? And we can go on to all the other coaching staff. The things Advocate was saying earlier about the fact that you can win trophies when you buy players over and you have a strong team and it allows you successes. It's the same manner, and I think, Mafinki, you pointed this out before. When South Africa awards the Coach of the Year, they award it purely based on the fact that you've won a trophy. But who really won it? Was it that coach that developed the players, or was it a group of players that were bought over from other areas and put together, and they found a way to actually just be a championship team? So when we award that success of a coach, automatically now that person gets placed in a position we can cherry pick from you. Hence, back in the day, if you can recall as well, Jeffrey Toyana was considered, because he won with the Lions, to replace as a national coach of the Proteas.
Yeah. I see Mafinks is keen to go. Yeah, I just want to add one thought in there, and maybe it takes the conversation in a different direction. So Mafinks, don't forget what you want to say. As you're talking, I'm reminded of the idea that a couple of months ago, I had this epiphany for myself. Right, you go on social media, and I suppose because of the nature of what I do, I'll often see these advertisements, 10x your business. In 3 months, we're going to teach you how to, I don't know, get millions of clients and earn millions of dollars or rands or whatever, And so it's almost like we're living in this society where to fast track things, to speed things up, is seen as the way to go. It's seen as, that's how things have to be, And I had this epiphany for myself, and the way I sort of reasoned it for myself and made sense of it for myself is around the idea of give me the 10-year journey. Give me the 10-year journey, because in the 10-year journey, I'll learn. I'll make mistakes. I'm going to stuff things up. I'm going to try some things that's going to work with one individual, with another individual it might, which means I have to pivot and discover a new way, or I have to go read a book, or I have to try something, I have to test something. In South Africa, we tend to seem to value more the fast tracking of individuals rather than the tried and tested sort of people who have figured it out, right? And I'm not actually talking just of myself here. And I'm not saying that I should be the person, or you, or any of us should. We as individuals, we're not going to solve these problems, right? But I'm thinking of, say, someone like JP Duminy, where it looks like he's being fast-tracked through the system quite rapidly, right? Ex-cricketer. I think within a year of him playing, he was already involved in a coaching gig high up. And sure, there's definitely things like, let's say I was a batting coach, right? And that was my expertise. After all of the years I've coached cricket, I think it's now 25 odd years, if not more. I've never played international cricket. Right? I've never done that as an individual. And so, yes, there would be things experientially that I might not have what a JP Duminy has, let's just say. But I would imagine that any batting coach who's spent that amount of time, that has learned, that have worked, that have tried to get 10-year-olds to fix a cricket technique, and they've had to really figure out how to do that. Bob Woolmer actually wrote in his book, if you can't coach a 10-year-old, you can't coach anyone. And so it's, and I have a lot of respect for Bob Woolmer, right? And I'm sure a lot of other people do too. And so that idea always stuck with me. And so we're taking cricketers who've got experientially, from a playing point of view, they know what worked for them and what didn't work for them. Where I think people who have coached and have walked the path of figuring things out, it's not about what's working for me. It's about seeing what you have in front of you and being able to see where that can go, and then being able to, in other words, what can I inspire this cricketer towards? Like, what is the potential that sits here? And then being able to unlock that potential, then being able to step into a space where you say, right, we're going to do A, B, C, and A, by the time we get to C, you will be, wherever that might be, right? And again, I'm making this sound as like the coach is driving a lot of these processes. I think that's part of the art of coaching, that it isn't just about telling it to the player. It is about, sort of, Mafink said this earlier, sort of alluding to I wrote here, relationships, right? It's about that relationship that you're building with the individual to get to understand them and know them, and you question them, and you're sort of walking this path together, this journey together, where we're working towards unlocking your potential, like getting you this thing that we see inside of you, to get that out. And often that takes time, right? And then you've got to ask, well, how invested are some of these coaches into the Cricketing South Africa system versus just building their CV so that they can move on? Because that's what it seems like. It seems like, let's get you up the system quite quickly. You've played before. You're a bit of a name. Let's get you up there. Boom. The likelihood of it really being working out, that you being really effective, is, in my mind, tiny, because the sort of backbone, the library of coaching isn't that well defined. And then move on to the next thing, right? Just move on to the next thing, move on to the next thing, and off they go. And all we've done is we've facilitated a person up the chain ladder because of a name, because of a character trait, because of something we felt we needed from that person, rather than sitting down and saying, who are the people that we really need? What is it that we really need a coach to be able to do in our national setup? And if we can't find the right person to fulfill a role, well, then I think we shouldn't employ somebody there. You don't just put somebody there with a title to say, hey, I got this title, we got this person there, but they're actually not adding the value in the way that you want them to add the value. It's more just, okay, we've got a coaching staff of 10 and we've got all these titles here. Yeah, I think I can just go on and on, right? Let's get to my things.
Thank you, Jody. I made a note, actually picked my hand up when you were speaking about that 10-year journey. And I always say to people, look, when you're a coach, you are everything to the player. And some people might think, okay, what does he mean by that? You are a technician, you are a tactician, but you are also a producer. So you produce ideas, you produce opportunities, right? But you are also we can say, like an innovator. So you have to help the player to think of new strategies. Like, maybe we should go back of the hand, slower ball. What about a googly slower ball? People never think of that. What about a Dusra slower ball? So you innovate, you become an innovator. But that also means you are a mentor to the player. Then you are a director. So you like the movie director of this player's career. And then you are a teacher, but lastly, you are a learner. There's a mentor of mine. He was doing his PhD at the university at the time. He said that in Nigeria, they had these IDs where on your ID, they write your occupation. And his university professor just wrote learner on the ID. And he asked, Prof, why are you writing that? He said, you know what? I might be a teacher, but I'm actually a learner. Everyone else is my teacher. So often we think that as coaches, we are incapable of learning from a player in the change room. That's why we think, okay, I'm the one who must do the teaching because I played first-class cricket or whatever. But you are also learning even things about yourself that, wow, I came into this change room projecting my views about Jody's incapacity. But actually, Jody turned out to be the guy who handles pressure the best. So we have to start from a position of open-mindedness. Otherwise, we'll never become a learner. There's a guy called Paulo Freire. Those who study social sciences know about a book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Paulo Freire said that learning should be a dialectic. So Paulo Freire actually disliked the idea of a podium where the lecturer stands on top of you and you are all sitting. He says that dynamic itself is about superiority and inferiority. You are sitting down and he's standing above you. He said, why don't we sit in a circle and all admit, including the teacher, that we are now going to learn from each other, So that's the first thing about that 10-year journey that you're speaking about, rather than just fast tracking. Now, based on what I've just said now, a coach needs to have that relationship with the player where I know a little bit about Jody if I'm coaching Jody. So I know who's Jody, where does the Martins family come from? Is Jody still living with mommy and daddy? Does mommy work? Does daddy work? So I need to know what's happening in Jody's life right now. And then I need to have a plan for Jody's future, short term, medium term, long term. So when I meet you, what's my short term plan for you? Last season, you averaged 30 with the bat. This season, we need to try and get you to average 35. And then if you get that right, we make you average 40. Right? So there's a friend of mine. So in 2022, I said something very provocative to some friends of mine on a WhatsApp group. So some of them said one of them said something about me because they knew that I'm coaching now. They said, ooh, they said there's an assistant coach job that's being advertised, but we know you. They said, no, Finks doesn't like to be an assistant. He likes to be in charge, right? And I asked them, why do you say that? They said, no, we know your character. And I said, you know what? In a way, you are right, but I can be an assistant if I'm working with somebody who doesn't have hierarchies, where we are a team and we have similar values and we're working together, right? But there's something else that I said to them. This was the provocative part. I said to them that, and I was playing devil's advocate. So those who study literature will know what it means to be devil's advocate. I said to them deliberately so. I said that there's, in my opinion, there's no good coach in South Africa, not even one. They said, what? Not even one. They said, what about so-and-so's franchise coach? He won so many competitions. What about that other franchise coach? And I said, aha. I said to them, according to my standards, not even I'm a good coach. They said, wow, it's the first time we hear you being so humble. I said, you know why? I haven't produced a player who can win us a World Cup. So I have no right, according to my standards, to gloat around and assuming that I'm a good coach. You see? Because remember, I said coaching is about helping people and organizations to become better. So if I'm working in an organization where they've never won a World Cup, then in that format, that's the standard, that's the challenge now. You understand? So those guys were a bit shocked, but they understood what I meant. And I said something to them. I said, every year we have Coach of the Year awards, right? But I said that, do the players those coaches produce actually win us World Cups? Or are they the same players who are subjected to name calling, which is unfair on those players, of calling them chokers, right? And the guys kind of like understood. So I said to them, no, I'm not saying that those guys actually aren't good coaches. I'm saying that if I was their advisor, I would say, guys, let's raise our standards by actually saying that we're not good coaches until we've collectively as a system achieved this. Because when you coach the Proteas, you can only make wine with the grapes you've got. So if I'm the franchise coach and I haven't produced you a player who can go to the Feroz Shah Kotla in Delhi with 100,000 people in a World Cup in India, and those people are screaming and shouting for Virat Kohli, right? And you've got that ball. If I can't coach you to be able to absorb all of that and still be able to pay attention to the relevant information, the relevant information is to bowl the ball that you want to bowl. Whatever Kohli does is up to him. And the result actually is not in your hand. What's in your hand is the process, right? So I'm now going into pressure. The reason why I'm going into pressure, all teams in the world have got a coach, an assistant coach, a bowling coach, a fitness coach, a mental coach, an analyst. We're not the only ones, right? So let's get off our high horses a bit. There are many teams, even now in the World Cup. Afghanistan is trying to win it, every other team, okay? So that means that the players, remember I mentioned skill, strategy, and mental management. The skills of South Africa's players are as good as any world-class player. That's why my first podcast with you guys, I told you that, you know what, that squad is a good squad on skill level. I don't even have half the skill those guys had. So they are great players. They deserve to be in the squad. Now it's going to be about which team can handle this thing called pressure, right? Now, if you speak to psychologists, they tell you about what they call, I'll use these two pens, a challenge skill equation, Jody. So this challenge skill equation is like a seesaw. So the blue pen is your skills, right? The red pen is the challenge in front of you. According to the challenge skill equation, if the challenge in front of you, the red pen, is far below your skills, you'll feel bored, right? You'll win easily. But guess what? On the other hand, if you feel or you perceive that the challenge in front of you is far greater than your skill, you will perceive yourself to be under pressure, right? So that challenge skill equation is what we mean when we speak about pressure. In 2003, I was a net bowler. I was a 14-year-old net bowler for Australia in Poch. And after that, we asked them questions, and Shane once said that, no, he just never feels under pressure. He said, nobody can show you where pressure is on your body. He says it's only a figment of your imagination. So he said that he makes a decision what field he's got, what ball he's going to bowl. And if you play a good shot, good on you, mate. That's what he said in his Australian language. So if you think about that now, it means that as coaches, not one coach, systemically, we need to produce players that can go to a World Cup with a stadium roaring in Ahmedabad in India. It's got 120,000 capacity, that stadium, at Gujarat, where they played the finals, the Indian team. How do I get you as a kid from Oudtshoorn like Otniel Bartman or as Aiden Markram or anyone else to go to that stadium with the stakes very high and still be able to pay attention to the relevant information? The relevant information is the ball coming at you. It's not the name of the bowler. It's not Bumrah. It's not anything else. So as a coach, again, my own ability to play cricket at international level has nothing to do with me getting you to be able to be ready for that moment. So a trainer of mine, a sports psychologist, Adrian McKinman, he used to say to me, he doesn't even want to know who's the top run scorer in world cricket or the best bowler. And I said to him, now, what if I'm going to bowl to the best run scorer in the world? He said, that's irrelevant. I said, what do you mean? He said to me, the only thing that's important to him is to get me to be the best version of myself and to be able to commit to my own decisions. And he used to say, don't impress, express. So we're trying too hard to impress people by saying we're going to win a cup or we're going to do this. I was looking this morning, Sachin Tendulkar, with his 25-year career, only has one World Cup, one. And he played international cricket for 25 years. And his record is better than all our batters in South Africa's team. He only has one World Cup. Brian Lara has no World Cups. A guy who scored 400 test runs, who scored 500 in a first-class game, whose average in most formats is very good. He's got no World Cup. So I refuse to believe that Carlos Brathwaite is a better player than AB de Villiers. It's impossible. But for some reason, Carlos Brathwaite was able to handle pressure in that one highlight of his career, probably better than AB. I think it's an injustice to South African cricket. Barbados, as an island country, they've got not more than 200,000 people, right? But Barbados produced a player who was able to win a World Cup. We've got 60 million people in South Africa, or 65 million. With the talent we've got, that's much greater than Carlos Brathwaite. We could have by now, since 1992, won at least one World Cup. So it doesn't boil down to the level that the coaches used to play at. It boils down to, is this the kind of human being who's going to help you to change and become better? And part of becoming better is to handle pressure, to go to territories you've never been to before mentally, because you've got the skill, right? So all those players have got the skill. So our challenge as coaches, that's what I meant when I said that, in my opinion, and I was just being naughty, I said to those guys in 2022 in my WhatsApp group, I don't think we've got one coach, not one good one. And I said, in my standards, everything else we've achieved before. But the one, we've never been to our own version of Mount Everest, which is winning a World Cup. And that's what we're looking for. Rohit Sharma has one World Cup, 2007 T20 World Cup. He wasn't picked for 2011 when India won the 50-over World Cup. And that's a guy who probably could walk into our team as an opening batter, you know. So I think we mustn't place too much on the players' shoulders that you guys must win the World Cup. In good mentoring, there's no must or should statements. It's we would like to. I would like to take 5 wickets today. I don't have to take 5 wickets. It's not a should or a must. So how do we create that environment as coaches? Lastly, a friend of mine said to me that, look, they gave him the job at Border. He's the assistant coach. And I said to him, I speak a lot to him. I used to play with him at university. He played some good first-class cricket. I said to him, boy, what do you think is going to be your challenge? I asked him one question. I said, how do coaches get fired? How do coaches lose their jobs? And he said, and I gave him the answer. I said, it's when the team is not winning. That's unfortunate. That's the harsh brutality of sport. So I said to him, since you are coaching a team in Division 2, what do you think your job is? I said to him, your job is to make sure those players are good enough to compete at international level. That way, you will go to Division 1 automatically and you will dominate Division 1. If you aim just to qualify for Division 1, chances are your squad won't be strong enough to sustain Division 1. You'll come back to Division 2. So I said to him, your job now is that if there's a bowler who took 35 wickets and averaged 20 or 32 with the ball, your job is to make him get 45 wickets and average 28 with the ball. It's about moving that player to a level he's never been at before, and then moving them up again, up again, up again, up again. So there's no thing where we go, whew, I got the job, I'm South Africa spin bowling coach, now I can relax. So too many of us in South Africa, we coach with one eye on our bank account, one eye on the exchange rate between the pound and the dollar, and one eye on the property prices. We don't want to go on journeys where we say, okay, how do I get Jody, who's averaging 45 for Lions, and he thinks he should play for South Africa? But I need to say to Jody, no, Jody, that's not good enough. For Lions, I need to help you to average 65. Because at international level against Rashid Khan and those guys, you might average 40 or 41 or 39. So it's about constantly developing ourselves as well as coaches. And that's why I'm saying, to simply say that somebody must have played so much of international cricket, that won't help you. We need to, so we often go like, okay, so what if Boucher didn't have a level 3, by the way? This idea that I've got level 3, I've got level 4, so I can relax now, that's not enough. We need to be having forums where we constantly developing ourselves as coaches, where we say, okay, so-and-so speciality is life coaching. Let's see how that can help cricket. So-and-so speciality is meditation. How can that help cricket? So-and-so speciality is nutrition, So that's why I told you guys that we need to think about an interdisciplinary coaching environment where we get people of different disciplines to come in and see how we ourselves can develop ourselves. So I think that's really where the answer lies. It's about teaming and constant development for coaches. Because how will you develop players if you feel like you've reached your ceiling, that, I'm now coaching South Africa, so now I can relax. What's the difference between that and the players who go, I'm now playing for South Africa and I've used it as a stepping stone to playing in the IPL. So I would have paid off my house in 1 or 2 years and bought so many cars and invested. So now I can relax. I can even tell South Africa that, you know what? My body feels too sore for this format or for personal reasons. I want to relax at home for that series. But in the IPL, nobody takes time off for personal reasons. You see? So it means that South Africa now has become a stepping stone to playing in the IPL. Previously, it was a stepping stone for Kolpak, where people play one test, take 1 wicket, and then they off to Kolpak. So we need to change our thinking, especially us as coaches. Thanks.
Sure, I think that's quite a lot, right? I see Russel is chomping at the bit here. He's had his hand up for quite some time.
I just want to echo, I'm going to be very short. I think I want to jump on the fact which you're saying that generally in South Africa, our approach has been that we emphasize reputation more than we do earning your, the hard yards and earning your dues and those sorts of things. Therefore, even like you spoke about the 10-year journey, even in the word, if you go in with your tenor, the first 3 letters of that is 10. You need to take a long time to kind of really get into, that's where the equity of relationships come to the fore, and you kind of can draw the best out of individuals, right? But I think we've got a folly in our thinking in terms of we're looking at, and I remember this also from the SJN, but I don't know why I keep referring back to the SJN, but Jacques Fall actually made mention of this, and you were speaking about it earlier, Jody, as well, where he says we needed to lift his eyes towards, he wanted particular coaches in position so the players can lift their eyes, right? I.e. get lost in this glamour of this big figure that's now taken over, whether you've had whatever form of international cricket or whatever. Never mind the fact that you maybe haven't earned your dues and you don't have the respect of the individuals, you don't have the rapport, you can't call out the best in them, all the things that Mafinki is saying right now, right? You didn't walk that yards. So you're coming in purely because you're going to lift the eyes of the players and hoping that that's enough. I think that's a folly way of thinking. It's really, it's like saying we're not actually looking for performing for excellence, because there's no guarantee that it's going to bring out excellence. It's not performance for excellence. It's more a matter of posturing for experience. Because what's going to happen is we're going to have certain key name figures that's in position that we can use that figureheads to promote the brand of cricket that we're wanting to play, right? So for instance, we buy these big name coaches so that, I'll use an example of Lions, for instance. Lions will recruit the big names lately. Russel Domingo, international coach. Help me out here. Alan Darnold, bowling coach.
Hashim Amla, batting coach.
Hashim Amla, all these. So we lift the eyes, supposedly, and we use them for a commercial benefit. So it's not only now, they've done it before, and I'm not having a dig again. This is observations. I'm not having a judgment on the CEO and the decision makers there. But they've done the same with JP when they brought JP Duminy in there. And JP was taking central pictures when they were trying to promote, he's the batting consultant, but in the commercial pictures was JP Duminy, which was supposedly dwarfing the players in the background. Never mind the head coach. The head coach could have been there. He wasn't. But for some other reason, these are the things, the way we do things, it's a falsitude. It's a fraud in a way, in that we have Guavu, right? A Wandile Guavu is the head coach, but JP Duminy is at the forefront, right? And these are the things I've confronted and said directly, but that falls on deaf ears for the most part, because they bought into this narrative that this is the way we do things. We need to lift the eyes, and this is the way. It's the exact same thing when we started to come together as a unified nation. Let's chase the pot of gold instead of finding a way to each other and get real with each other. Like, is there benefit in doing what we're doing, right? Putting the same old mentalities at the forefront. So some of the things that I question is the matter of performing or coaching for performance versus performing for these coaches to keep bolstering and promoting their brand. Because for the most part, that's what they want. These coaches want the performances so they can put their chest out, promote their brands, the sense of experience for themselves personally, and they can walk away feeling glamored that the organization can now go and say, we won a World Cup so we can ask for more money. We justifiably got all these big names to enhance our name, right? You need JP Duminy, you need Hashim Amla, you need Russel Domingo so that the Lions is bigger. That doesn't make sense to me. But that seems to be the way they're thinking. And it goes all over. It's not just the Lions. I'm just using that because it plays into this concept. To lionize people more than excellence, it's a problem. Lionizing means I keep pushing them up as experts or keep pushing them up as celebrities. And that's what we're doing. We're lionizing these individuals. And that's the mistake that we're making, because it's a flaw in the system. Because when the pressure comes, like Mafinki just pointed out, there's no character that we can draw from, because we've been through the hard times that we can say, we can overcome, we can take on this challenge. No, we just go get a guy who had seemingly given the privilege before, and we put him there and we say, yes, look, raise your eyes. We've got the best in the best here, and so therefore we can do it. You go do it just like him, but it's got no substance in it. No substance.
Yeah, I think all of that's well said, to be honest. I think you're touching on a whole bunch of things that's sort of really interested, that I'm in particular very interested in, and especially from a coaching point of view, right? This idea of experience, coaching for performance, right? Mafinki earlier spoke about learning. And so maybe give me a moment to just I don't know if it's too theoretical in nature, but this is my understanding, right? And I'll see how I connect it back to our conversation around coaching. I think I appreciate the idea of learning, right? And I think it's a very important component to have as an elite cricketer. If you're looking to become exceptional, if you can't learn, if you haven't got that ability, the likelihood of you getting there and staying there very small. However, my understanding is if we coach for performance, performance isn't about learning. Performance is, and I think I've said this before, it's like we're on the knife edge, right? It's the sharp end of the stick. It's not, learning is a step back. It's being reflective. It is being more open-minded. If I had to associate sort of an attitude with it, right? It's that ability to look inward and say, shucks, where have I stuffed up? Where can I get better, right? What's working? What's not working? That's very important skill to have. When it comes to performance, we can't be like that. That is not how performance works and functions. Performance is, what do I know and how can I execute that under these pressures that I perceive, right? The experience I'm busy having on the inside, for whatever reason. It's because how I was raised. It's because of my perception about the nature of this tournament. It's the perceptions we carry with us around the ideas of the Proteas team, say within the context that we're having these conversations. And so the way I formulate all of these things in my mind, and I can walk out along with my own motivations, and I can walk onto the field and go execute what I know. And so I think coaches don't coach like that, because we're often driven to this idea of learning, right? So we got to learn, we got to ask the questions. We've got to, in South Africa, there's very much a player-centered approach to coaching, right? Coach-driven, but player-centered. In other words, as the coach, I'm driving processes. However, I'm letting the player sort of provide the content of the processes, right? Their journey, their path, etc. And our coaches in our education system get taught to like ask questions and this sort of thing. When it comes to performance, I'm not saying coaches should not ask questions, and use that approach. I'm more saying that there's a shift in focus away from outcome in particular. And that's something that we've referenced in these conversations so much. You just have to listen to the previous one where Russel and I sort of dig into this whole idea of winning, right? And to win is an outcome. It's something that lives in the future. You're not in control of it. It's there. But winning, focusing on winning, creates worry. And if we're worrying, we're not present, because you're living in the future. And performance only happens in the present moment. I think, Mafinks, you've also said this a couple of times in our conversations. And so I think all of these things, right, as I'm sitting here and how these ideas are playing through my mind, is that it is our systemic nature of within our country, right? How it plays out. We're sort of highlighting these elements, right? How we employ coaches, how coaches get to be in the positions that they're in, what we value within our system, what's the criteria that we create around these job descriptions, the experience that we think a person must have in order to be successful. I think if you start putting these puzzle pieces together, then it makes complete sense, right? Like, what is the 13-year-old coach, not 13-year-old coach, the coach who coaches 13-year-olds in our country? What is he aspiring those cricketers to? All right. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick. Because if it's only about winning this tournament, if it's only about this tournament, this moment, this event, then, and it's only about winning, and that's sort of what we're building, then that's what that child gets taught is important. That's the value that they taught. And so it doesn't matter, like, we have this perpetuating thing that delivers us these cricketers that focus externally and they focus in the future versus focusing internally and focusing on the now. And so I'd hope that when people listen to this conversation, what they get from this is that they've got to learn to aspire to something different. That we can't just aspire to having a title. We can't just aspire. And personally, I did that for a very long time, and it wasn't very good in terms of my own experience that I was having. But I'm hoping that people can say, I'm aspiring to make a difference. I'm aspiring to, no matter what happens in this World Cup, I want to produce a generation of cricketers at my academy, at my school. I want to walk this journey with people to help them cultivate the ideas and the mindsets and the understandings of how to be a good teammate, how to be able to step into pressure moments and be my everything in this moment. And I think the more we can do that, the more we can create a shift over time in our system that produces cricketers at the back end that can walk into the World Cup as winners, as we say. Mafinks.
Thank you, Jody Martins. Actually, I'm in agreement with you. So the part of being a learner is just one aspect of coaching, because I spoke about being a tactician, a mental coach, a producer and whatnot. But I also did mention when I spoke to the guy who's the assistant coach at Border that how do coaches lose their jobs? It's when teams are not performing. So yes, it's still performance driven, but it's the how we want to do it. I've listened to your past few episodes where you spoke about, yes, we could win by one run, right? But it's not sustainable. You know, how we win is also important. So those kind of things are important. So yes, there's a level of cricket where it's about performance. And therefore, as a coach, how do I get this guy to still be able to perform when there's 120,000 people at that stadium? And now just to close it off, my point that I wanted to emphasize today is that the coach, whether it's Jody, whether it's someone Pete Pompis or whoever, right, does not necessarily need to have played international cricket for them to be able to help human beings to become goal-orientated, to be clear, to be focused, to stay in the present, and to execute their skills. You understand? Because that criteria is what's making our system, not one team or the Proteas. Our system is losing out on people who could have added so much value because we've got a criteria that is by nature exclusive rather than inclusive. So that's it from my side. I do thank you guys.
Yeah, just wanted to also jump on what we said earlier, like this thing is kind of circling back for me in a way. The main question around our coaching, if we just take it back to the Proteas now, because the discussion is mostly around the Proteas coaching at the moment with all the coaching staff that they have there. We're not going to get into any details on it, but just to wrap it up, I often ask the question, and it's going to remain almost a rhetorical question right now for the moment, right? It's a matter of, are we coaching celebrities, celebs, chokers, or champions? That's the key. What are we capacitating? Are we coaching celebs, brand management, enhancing your brand, whether it's you as a coach or as a player? Are we coaching chokers, where consistently on the field, it seems like you're succumbing to the pressures and you don't find any reserves to actually tap into to overcome that pressure? Or lastly, are we actually champions? Are we coaching champions who gets to deliver this cup and raise it, right? That's the whole analogy of what it looks like. Because I see a lot on social media, for instance, consistently at the moment, through Cricket South Africa's social media platforms and so forth, there's constant referencing clutching the clutch players, right? The clutch players, as in they are actually the guys that's going to be able to handle and endure these pressures. But for the most part, there are only glimmers of this, right? Instead, what I think they should be doing and what we were advocating for, the 10 years of developing yourself as a coach and therefore enhancing players, excellence and greatness, is really to be clutching at the straw of the sippy cup. And maybe that way you'll be able to endure the pressures and work worthy of this cup where you can truly drink from it. And for me, that's the real, in a nutshell. Coaching has that imperative. It rises and falls, and therefore coaches get fired if they don't get their jobs over the line. This is not subpar. You need to, if you're not producing the goods, ultimately, that's it, the end of the road for you type of thing. And that's why you need to be able to focus on the right things. Thanks, Jody.
Yeah, awesome. As always, enjoyed this conversation. I think I just want to challenge everybody out there that I know that there's some coaches that are listening in on these conversations. And if you found some value in this, please forward it on. Please forward this and other conversations on. If you feel like the narrative must change, if you feel like the story we're telling must shift, if you feel like we've got to start focusing on different things, then just to your little circle where you are, and maybe a little bit beyond that, please share these conversations, follow the channel, like, subscribe, do all of those cool things, because that also helps us get the message further on the platforms through their algorithms and all that sort of stuff. Cool. Gents, I thank you very much. See you in the next one.
Thanks for inviting me, guys. Take care.